You know, when we look at who we are as women, we really have to look at where we come from as women. And I always encourage women from other tribes to take a look at where they were before pre-European contact. You know, what belonged to women. You know, I do know that in the work that I've done on a national level, is that tribal women, we had rights. We owned property. We had our children with us. Our children belonged to the women. And with the impact of colonization, those rights were skewed because we had our white sisters coming from Europe who were the property of the men. And the children were the property of the men as well. And so you had this group of people coming and interfacing with tribal women all across Turtle Island, whether it was in the eastern coast or the western coast. And what they found there was women who had owned property, you know. But the thing that was depicted with what women were, what was written about tribal women by the explorers, the priests, or the, you know, the priests, the churches, you know, what was written about women is that they depicted this image of Indian women. And if you close your eyes and imagine, what's your image of an Indian woman? And one thing that was portrayed of us as Indian women is that we had this thing on our back and we were towing something, you know, we had like wood, or we were towing something somewhere, or else either that or we were standing by a big black pot cooking, you know. But if you could do a paradigm shift to that idea, then the woman that had this stuff on her back, that was her property. It was what she owned, and she was carrying it somewhere, you know. And that pot, that big black pot, belonged to her. In our culture as Lakota Sioux women, the teepee that we had was the woman's domain. It was our teepee. And what went on inside that teepee was our responsibility. Today, we're real fortunate as tribal women that we don't have to set up those big, you know, 16-foot teepees anymore, you know. Our brothers, our male relatives are the ones that have learned how to set up first at 3 poles, you know, and then bringing in the next poles, you know, until you have 12 poles that are standing up, you know. Our brothers do that today. So, you know, we've been real kind of spoiled as women because we don't have to do this anymore, you know. But in our tribe, you know, can you imagine women? They would have contests to see how fast women could put up these teepees, you know. And I know within our tribe there might be just, you know, 2 or 3 sets of women that could do it. But I certainly couldn't. You know, I'd have to have my brothers or my male relatives come and help me with that particular task that tribal women were responsible. And she owned that. It belonged to her. You know, and so if you look at who you are today as women, what are the rights that you have? Especially our white sisters. You know, where'd that come from? You know, about 20 years ago, feminist historians began to have the eyes to see where suffragists like Matilda Joslyn Gage, Anthony, you know, where they got their ideas from about women's equality. It was from the Iroquois Nation, because the majority of those suffragist women had been adopted by the clan mothers. And so they began to get their ideas about women's rights, and they adopted many of their ideas about women's equality from those clan sisters from the Iroquois Nation. And so when we work today for equality for women, you know, I work for tribal women to reclaim that equality that existed for us prior to colonization. For our white sisters, I worked for equality for them. But also, you know, in today's world, you know, for tribal women, you know, it's pretty confusing because many of our male relatives have adopted those ways of our white male relatives, you know, and how they viewed women, how they view women today. So I always encourage women, especially tribal women, go back to the day there was the pre-colonization, the contact, before that contact happened. How was it for tribal women all over Turtle Island, all over Canada, Mexico? We'll find that women definitely had rights. And I remember there was a sociologist, Susan Fletcher. She wrote a lot about, especially in South Dakota, she came and wrote a lot about what was happening to the Indian people there back around 1860s, you know. And Susan Fletcher, I remember one of the work that she wrote about was that she had gone to Fort Randall, and where Sitting Bull, Chief Sitting Bull, was being held, because he was incarcerated there, you know, and he was sitting there, and one of his wives came in with food, with wood, and she was stoking the fire. She was getting this fire, you know, warming up the fire in the teepee where he was held, our tent. And he was sitting there, he was looking at her, you know, and Susan said, "Is there anything you think I could help you with?" And he looked at her, and he said, "You know," he said, "by me signing these treaties, our Indian women's lives are going to change." He said, "I want you to look out and write about our Indian women." And he had a ring on, and he took it off and gave it to her to do that. You know, and so that for me was, again, you know, really, you know, that this chief, particular chief, Sitting Bull from Standing Rock, knew what was going to happen to us as tribal women. You know, when they signed those treaties, when the Treaty of Fort Laramie was signed in 1868, you know, that our lives as women, the lives that we knew to be, would change. There's another story of I think it was, okay, I never can pronounce his name, but the one that did Mount Rush, that's doing Crazy Horse Monument. His sister, and I always say this because his sister came to Crow Creek, you know, our reservation, and they say they came for their what is honeymoon. And I said, why would anybody want to go Crow Creek for a honeymoon, you know? And I always tease my sister Roxanne from there, you know. But in what was written was that she was standing there talking to this group of tribal women there, and one of them gave a horse away, you know. She gave this other woman a horse. She said, you know, well, you can have this horse, you know. And the woman took it, you know. It was like she just stopped. She said, why are you doing that? And the woman said, why? And she said, you just gave a horse away. Shouldn't you ask your husband? Oh. And she said, my husband? Why? The horse belongs to me. She said, for a moment, I forgot who I was talking to, you know. And so again, you know, that whole sense of property will belong to us. It belonged to us, and it was ours to give or to keep. And when the Fort Laramie was treaty, and many of the treaties were, from the eyes of the federal government in the colonization period, they only looked, because they came from their own background of where only men were in positions of power. Only men signed treaties. Only men were in Congress. You know, and so from that position, then they came, and they only wanted men in leadership position. The result of that was like, when you look at the Iroquois Nation, the clan mothers picked who would represent their clan, you know. And so they had a process of nurturing a male to get to that point. There was things that this man could not do in order for him to be in a leadership position for the Iroquois Nation. To the skies. Mahbia takya etuwaye nikushiku chia he yankelu he chekiayo chekiayo anahopta yankelu hey ho to the earth. Makatakia etuaye nikushiku he chia he yankelu he chekiayo chekiayo anahopta yankelu